My name is Arthur Coleman, and I'm the man who cheered for a rocket while my own family drifted away in silence. I was there in 1981 when Columbia first tore a hole in the sky, drove 14 hours straight from Ohio, slept in my car just to feel it. I thought I was witnessing the most important moment in history, a great leap for all of us. And maybe it was, but from this old chair in this quiet house that Eleanor and I bought 50 years ago, the memory feels different. The roar of that launch has faded over the decades, but the silence that grew between me and my son, Mark, that's a sound that only gets louder with time. I believe so much in the power of the big things, the grand projects that were supposed to build a better world. I just didn't realize I was using those big dreams as an excuse to avoid the small, important world right here in these rooms, the one that needed a husband and a father, not a spectator. You had to be there to understand. It wasn't just a machine on a launch pad, it was a promise. We'd been through some hard years, and that shuttle felt like proof we could still do the impossible together. I remember standing in the dark before dawn, a stranger on my left, another on my right, nobody speaking. We were just a sea of faces pointed in one direction, waiting, and then it started, not a shake, not like an earthquake. It was a hum, a deep vibration that came up from the ground through the soles of your shoes and into your bones. It felt like the whole planet was holding its breath. We weren't from Ohio or Florida or anywhere else in that moment. We were just people united by this single incredible thing we were about to see. I held on to that feeling for 40 years, believing it was the most powerful connection a person could ever experience. I thought that shared purpose was everything. I was a machinist back then in Dayton. My hands were always nicked, always smelled of cutting fluid and steel. Every day was about precision, about making small, perfect parts for bigger machines I'd never see. It was good, honest work, and it paid the bills. But my mind was always somewhere else. It was up there in the sky. When they announced the shuttle launch, it felt like a personal summons. Eleanor didn't understand. She saw the overtime I was working to pay for the trip, the weekend I'd be gone. She saw an empty chair at the dinner table. Mark was a teenager, all angles and quiet resentment. He just saw a father who was leaving. But I saw it as my duty. I was helping build the country on the factory floor, and I felt I had earned the right to see what all that hard work was for. The 14-hour drive wasn't a burden. It felt like shedding a skin, leaving the smallness of my life behind for something monumental, something that mattered for everyone. The air in Florida was different. It was thick. You could taste the salt in it. We parked miles away and walked in the dark, joining a river of people flowing toward the coast. There were thousands of us, but it was strangely quiet. It wasn't a festival. It was a vigil. We found a spot on the grass, a family from Georgia on one side, a couple of college kids on the other. We didn't talk much. We just nodded, sharing a thermos of coffee, our faces all turned in the same direction, toward the skeletal tower in the distance. Columbia sat there under the floodlights, looking like a cathedral from another world. In that pre-dawn stillness, I felt a connection to those strangers that was deeper than anything I'd felt in years. We were bound by a shared faith. We believed we were about to see the future born, right there in front of us. There was no argument, no division. There was only the sound of crickets and the collective silent prayer that it would all work. And then it happened, not with a bang, but with a bloom of light. A silent, impossible flower of white gold fire unfurled at the base of the shuttle, so bright it turned the night into a false noon. For 2 or 3 long seconds, that was it, just the light. There was no sound at all, a total, holy silence that held 100,000 people breathless. In that quiet moment, watching that machine begin to climb on a pillar of pure light, I felt clean. Everything fell away. The factory, the arguments, the bills, the unspoken disappointments. It was just me and this perfect silent ascent. Then the sound arrived. It wasn't a noise you hear with your ears. It's a physical wave that hits you in the chest, a roar that vibrates through your bones and seems to shake the very soul. It was the sound of a nation's promise being kept, and I cheered. I yelled until my throat was raw, certain that I was witnessing the greatest thing a man could ever see. I drove home with that roar still in my ears, feeling 10 feet tall. I had been a part of something that would be in the history books forever. I walked through my front door expecting, I don't know what, a hero's welcome? No, not that, but at least a little bit of shared pride, a reflection of the awe I felt. Instead, I found a different kind of silence. Eleanor was in the kitchen, her back to me, her shoulders slumped in a way that spoke volumes. The air smelled of a pot roast that had been kept warm for hours, dry and tired. She turned, and there was no anger in her eyes. It was worse. It was a quiet, settled disappointment that said she wasn't surprised, just weary. Mark was a ghost in the living room, a shadow in front of the television. I had come back from witnessing the future and landed in a house that felt like a museum of things left unsaid. The grandest moment of my life had no echo here. Later that night, I tried to make them see. I spread the newspaper on the dining room table, the picture of Columbia, a black and white blaze on the front page. "Look at this," I said, my voice still full of the launch's thunder. "We did this. All of us." Mark just glanced at it. He was 16 then, all sharp elbows and quiet judgment. He looked from the picture to me, and his voice was low and steady. "You missed my game," he said. I felt a flash of anger. "This is bigger than a baseball game, son. This is for your future." He shook his head slowly, and the words that came out next have been ringing in my ears for 40 years. "No," he said. "You just love a rocket more than you love your family." I slammed my hand on the table. I called him ungrateful. I told him he didn't understand sacrifice. I did everything except listen. I built a wall in that moment, brick by angry brick. That argument was the last time we ever really talked about anything that mattered. After that, we had weather conversations. We talked about the car, about my job, about his schoolwork. But the big things, the things that live inside your heart, they went silent. The distance between us became a solid thing, a piece of furniture in the house that we just learned to walk around. I kept the launch ticket from that day, tucked it inside a book on my shelf. For years, I'd take it out and remember the fire and the sound, the feeling of being part of something immense. But as time went on, the memory started to change. The ticket stopped feeling like a souvenir of a great victory. It started to feel like evidence, a receipt for a price I didn't know I was paying. The faded ink, the brittle yellowed paper. It's a monument to the day I looked up at the sky and forgot to look at the people right beside me. The real weight isn't the memory of the launch. It's the memory of Eleanor's face when I got back. It's a ghost I've lived with for decades. There was never a big fight, never a door slammed. It was quieter than that, and so much worse. It was in the way she'd look at me when I was reading the paper about some new project, some national goal. Her eyes would just glaze over, not with boredom, but with a kind of settled sadness. She knew my body was in the chair across from her, but my mind was a million miles away, building a world that had no room for us. I was a good provider. I never missed a day of work. I put food on the table. But I was a terrible partner in the small, quiet business of living. She needed a husband who was present, who saw the leak in the faucet as an emergency, not a distraction from the grand march of progress. I gave her a house, but I never truly made it a home. Now, my biggest fear, it's not about dying. A man my age makes peace with that. It's about dying misunderstood. I'm terrified that Mark will stand over my grave and remember a father who was always looking over his shoulder toward a bigger, more important horizon. That he'll only remember the coldness, the lectures about duty and sacrifice that were really just excuses for my own absence. I wanted to give him a world to be proud of, but I never stopped to ask what kind of father he was proud of. He needed me there in the stands at his baseball game, cheering for him, for one boy on one afternoon. Not for an idea, not for a country, but for him. And I wasn't there. The dread that sits in my chest every night is the thought that he'll never know I see that now. That he'll go through the rest of his life believing his father was just a man made of steel and headlines with no heart inside. But the sharpest piece of it all, the piece of shrapnel that's still working its way out after 40 years, is what he said to me that night. You just love a rocket more than you love your family. I heard the words, but I didn't listen. I felt attacked, so I defended myself with anger. I called him a kid, told him he couldn't see the big picture. But he saw it perfectly. He saw the only picture that mattered. In that one sentence, he told me the entire truth of my life, and I was too proud and too blind to accept it, that accusation. It wasn't an insult, it was a diagnosis, and it was correct. I had made an idol out of progress, out of the collective dream, and I sacrificed my own son on its altar. What good is helping build a better world if you can't even build a bridge to your own child? That question has haunted every single day since. It's the real roar that never fades. And now, 40 years later, the silence is gone. But what's replaced it? I'm not sure it's any better. I sit here in this old chair and I can hear them in the kitchen, my son Mark and his boy Leo. They're not yelling, not really. It's the tone. It's sharp, it's brittle, like two pieces of metal grinding against each other. Leo is so certain that everything is broken, that all the big stories we told ourselves were just lies. And Mark, my God, Mark sounds just like I did. He's trying to sell his son on the value of hard work, on believing in something bigger than yourself. But his words have no weight. They're hollow echoes of speeches I once gave. I sit here listening to a father and son speak in different languages, and the sound of it, it's the sound of that old wall I built, being raised all over again between them. It's my failure playing out on a 40-year delay. I think that's what gets to me the most. The contrast. I close my eyes and I'm back in that field in Florida. 100,000 strangers and the only sound was the crickets. We didn't know each other's politics. We didn't care where we came from. We just knew we were all looking up at the same star, sharing the same quiet hope. We were a we. It felt so simple, so real. Now I listen to my own family, and they sound like two different countries at war over a dinner table. They're not trying to build anything together. They're just trying to prove the other one wrong. Every word is a weapon. We've lost the common horizon. We've traded that quiet field of shared belief for a million little rooms where everyone just shouts their own truth into the dark. We're so busy drawing lines between each other that we've forgotten how to look up together at all. And I see now what I couldn't see then. I hear Mark telling Leo, you have it so easy, you don't understand what it took to build all this, and I feel the blood drain from my face. It's the same lecture, almost word for word, that I gave him after I got back from that launch. It's the same empty appeal to a grand idea that ignores the person standing right in front of you. I was so convinced I was teaching him about sacrifice and a greater purpose. But all I was really doing was telling him that his feelings didn't matter, that my big dream was more important than his small world. And now Mark is doing the same thing. He's not connecting with his son, he's trying to win an argument. And I realized the great tragedy wasn't that I loved a rocket. The tragedy is that I used that love as a shield, so I wouldn't have to do the harder work of loving the person right next to me. And then, just last week, it happened. Leo and Mark were in the kitchen, their voices like knives. Leo scoffed, "You two in your good old days, what did any of it get us?" And in that moment, 40 years of silence in my heart finally broke. I didn't say a word. I just got up, my old bones creaking, and walked over to the desk where I keep my ghosts. I took out that brittle, yellowed ticket from 1981 and laid it on the table between them. The noise stopped. I looked at my son. Mark really looked at him, maybe for the first time since he was a boy. and I finally said the words that had been stuck in my throat for a lifetime. "I went to see this," I told him, my voice trembling just a bit. "I thought it was the most important thing in the world, and I was wrong. The most important thing was right here, waiting for me, and I didn't see it until it was too late. I failed you, Mark." The silence that followed, it wasn't the old cold silence. It was the sound of a wall finally coming down. A week later, Mark came over by himself. He didn't say much. He just walked over to the mantelpiece where I keep a small framed photo of Columbia rising on a pillar of fire. He set something down next to it. It was a picture of him as a boy, maybe 10 years old, standing next to his mother in the backyard, both of them squinting in the sun. He just put it there, a quiet little memory next to my roaring one. We sat there for a long time, not saying anything. Just before he left, he looked at me and said, "I remember Mom being sad that you were gone that weekend." It wasn't an accusation. It was just a fact we now shared. And I knew then. I knew that the greatest thing we can ever build isn't a rocket or a monument. It's a bridge back to the people we've hurt. And that bridge isn't made of steel or grand ideas. It's built with two simple, terrifying words. "I'm sorry." The time confirmed it for me. Humility is the only thing strong enough to span the distance we create with our pride. So I ask you, what rocket are you watching? We all have one. A big idea, a grand cause, a belief that we are on the right side of history. We stand in our own field staring up at it, feeling that powerful sense of unity with our side. But pride is a lonely business. It builds wonderful things in the sky and terrible walls on the ground. And the silence behind those walls, it's a cold, heavy thing that grows until it fills every room. I'm asking you to think about the last time you chose to be right instead of being kind. The last time you let an argument hang in the air, unfinished, because your pride wouldn't let you speak first. Was it worth it? Was the victory of your argument worth the silence that followed? Because I can tell you after 40 years, the only sound louder than a rocket is the sound of a heart you never bothered to mend. Here is the only advice this old man has left. Think of that one person, the one you have that wall with, and pick up the phone or walk across the street. Don't go to relitigate the past. Don't go to prove your point one last time. Just go to listen. Just ask, "How are you?" And then be quiet enough to hear the answer. The great unifying project we're all waiting for isn't going to be built by grand gestures. It's going to be built one quiet conversation at a time, at a kitchen table. It starts with two people choosing to see each other again. My son and I, we're not fixed, but we're talking. And for the first time in a long time, the quiet in this house feels like peace, not absence. And that is a greater wonder than anything I ever saw in the sky.